Welcome everyone to taking care of your students and yourself in the year ahead. On behalf of Amudim Israel and Machon Dvir, my name is Dr. Tzachi Fried. I'm the clinical director of Machon Dvir. I'm filling in for a colleague of mine, John Ifrach, who's out sick. Hopefully in the next installment of this series, everyone will meet him. And joined by Yochanan. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Yochanan. I work for Amudim Israel, and it's a great pleasure to meet you guys and to participate in this event. Getting ready to help our students have an amazing year.
All right. Okay. All right, Yochanan, should we jump right in?
Yeah, I'll jump right in. I'll give a short introduction, and hopefully we'll have some more people joining us. So the first part of this talk is, who is a madrich? What is a madrich? And the word madrich really, in its own right, from the word hadracha, to guide or to lead, is a very important role. A lot of how we view these students is going to be how they view themselves. I think that's just an important point to start off with. If a person is in a position of hadracha, a person is in a position to lead or guide other people. So one of the things I heard from one of these motivational speakers, some of you may have heard him, Gedalia Fenster, he said, don't educate, demonstrate. And really, to be a good role model, I think is the first lesson, number one. To be a good role model, to present to these students a dugma of what you represent, and hopefully give that over to them. They can see a person who is representing the Yeshiva standard that you belong to, the Torah standard, obviously, and God's will for his people as a whole. I heard a beautiful story. My wife told me over. It's one of these Hanoch Teller stories, I believe, where there was a person working on Wall Street, and as he's going down the stairs into the subway, so there's a peddler there, someone there who's looks like he's collecting money, and he says, he's calling out for a dime. So the man reaches into his pocket and puts a dime on the table, and he starts walking away. And this peddler runs over to him and says, Mister, says, you forgot your pencil. So, and he looks back and he says, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were a merchant. And he took the pencil and he thanked him for his pencil that cost him a dime. A year later, he's walking down the same subway stairs, and this time he goes to a newspaper stand, and he goes to the newspaper stand. He says, how much for the paper? He says, the paper's on me. He says, you don't recognize me. But a year ago, I was a person trying to sell pencils, and my view of myself was that I was a pencil pusher. I was a peddler. But you called me a merchant. And after you called me a merchant, I thought to myself, well, maybe I can be a merchant. And because you saw me as someone who could potentially be more than just someone who's pushing pencils, I decided to open up my first newspaper stand. And now I have newspaper stands all over this subway system. So that's an amazing lesson for a madrich, for any educator, for anyone who wants to demonstrate how to really help people, is to give them kavod, is to give them respect, show them who they really can be. I remember I was once not lost, but I was in Central Park, and I made up with a biking buddy of mine to meet, and I was sitting on a corner somewhere, and I'm waiting. This is going back some years before everybody had cell phones, and I'm waiting on one corner. He's not there, so I take a walk to the other corner, and he's not there. I start to get anxious. Maybe I missed him. Maybe I'm in the wrong corner. The worst thing to do is to start wandering around. And I thought I for sure missed him. I'm starting to feel really down. And there's this woman who's walking top speed with headphones in her ears with a huge smile. And she's beaming and she's radiating. And as she passes me, we lock eyes, we make contact, and she's just smiling. And right away, all of my anxiety disappeared just from that smile. So that's something I just wanted to start off with. If a person is a madrich, if a person is meeting these boys on a daily basis, often a madrich is tasked with the wonderful job of getting the boys up and out in the morning, going around to their rooms, wishing them good morning, seeing them at the end of the day when it's time to go to bed. The little bit that we can respect these young men and give them a vision of who they can be, that goes a long ways to giving them confidence and helping them improve their own self-image. So that is something that I thought is paramount to the Madrich's role. And Sachi, I'm going to give it over to you. We're going to talk about the next validation and empathy, recognizing, communicating.
Sure. So when we think about the role of a madrich and what it means to, be the person who's, in the really in the day-to-day with them and trying to inspire these kids, trying to give them, like Yochanan was pointing out, kavod, and trying to help them reach their potential. It's complicated by the fact that there's sort of this dual role, because on the one hand there's the role towards the guys. On the other hand, the madrich himself is also in this place of still working on himself, still on his own growth, and so that balance is delicate and is important to find, and it's very, very tricky. And so something that we're going to talk about now is the idea of empathy and validation and boundaries. And on the surface, when you think about these two concepts, it almost seems like they're opposed. To show empathy is to connect with somebody, and boundaries on the surface is to separate, to draw a line in the sand. And so how do these go together, and how do these complement each other and factor into communication, factor into facilitating growth both of yourself and of the guys in yeshiva? So if we start by talking a little bit about empathy, so what's the difference between empathy and sympathy? Right? It can be very often confused. So if we think about it, sympathy is this idea of I feel bad for you. It's sort of this communication that's coming from a different level. Sort of I'm looking down at you almost. Empathy is more of a connective term. There's I feel bad with you, connecting to the emotion, and it's connected in some very strong ways to the concept of validation. So a word that gets thrown around a lot, validation. So what does validation mean? Validation is based on the assumption that people make sense. And there's a reason why people do what they do, think what they think, and feel what they feel. Nothing's for no reason. And when we recognize that this person, they're the guy who is crying over spilled milk, right? What seems to be to me, nothing. The guy who's not waking up for shacharis for the 10th day in a row. The guy who's whatever he's feeling, whatever he's thinking, whatever he's doing, there's a reason why. A reason that is understandable if I knew all the details. That's the basis on which we can validate, we can communicate validation. The idea that people make sense. How does one communicate validation, right? So one way to do it in the communication is labeling the emotion. Somebody's coming to you and they're expressing themselves. Something's really upsetting. Something's making them anxious. Something is making them really angry. They're telling you a story, and within the story that they're telling you, you can identify what they're feeling. Wow, that feels incredibly upsetting. Like, I can't even imagine how anxious you were. Labeling the emotion within the content of the story that they're telling you. When you can do that, when you can identify what the emotion is, that validates the experience. It's communicating, okay, I get it, I understand. And when you can communicate to somebody that you understand them, that's an empathic communication. That's a connection over there. Beyond just labeling the emotion, though, is also normalizing the emotion. So what does this mean? that would get me really upset also. I totally understand, I totally understand how you feel. I've been in similar situations also. Yeah, I would have been freaking out too if I was in that situation. When you can identify with the emotion and you can say how you too in this situation might feel it, there's a certain normalization that's happening there. And this is something that we do often, and we don't even notice that we do it in communication, but we do it intuitively in order to connect with the other person. We communicate with the person that your experience is understandable. What's important here, and what might be a trap that we sometimes fall into, is that when people come to us with some kind of problem or some kind of painful event, we're nice guys. We want to help them, right? And so very often we go straight into advice giving and problem solving, and we tell people what to do, based on our experience, based on what we think is the correct thing to do. And sometimes it's not the wrong thing. Sometimes it's called for. But the yesod over here is that very often people know how to solve their own problems. People know what to do. People know how to figure out situations, even very complicated situations. What people need from other people is to be heard and to be understood. And sometimes when people can feel that way, they'll connect much, much better to the advice that you're giving. And when they don't feel like that, they're not necessarily going to go for the advice and the help, because that's not exactly what they were looking for, not exactly what they came in for. And so what a lesson that's important to take away is the focus is primarily connecting, primarily identifying what's going on, helping bring out in the other person a feeling of being heard. Another trap that we often fall into, and we can notice this in ourselves in our interactions, something that we do automatically, is that when we're in a conversation with somebody, we're not totally present with them in the moment. In our mind, we're already 2 steps ahead. And if it's not that we're thinking about what we're going to respond, which we very often do, we're thinking about, okay, where's the person going with this? What are they trying to communicate? And in our minds, we're there already. So we're 2 steps ahead of them. And it's hard. It's an instinct. It's hard to stop. We can't tell ourselves to not think a certain way or not feel a certain way. We can notice the way we react. And what's important over here might be it's going to sound very simple, but to wait for the other person to completely finish what they were going to say before responding. It sounds a little silly to even say it, but if we think about our own interactions and we pay attention, we do this so often. We just jump in. We don't necessarily wait for the person to finish, because in here they've already finished. We already know what they're going to say. So waiting it out, noticing that tension that's there, that's waiting for us to jump in, and calming ourselves, maintaining eye contact, waiting for them to finish, and then reflecting back to them what they say, and taking note of the emotional communication, what they're feeling, what they're communicating that they're feeling, and connecting to that. That helps people feel understood. It helps people feel connected, and it helps people be receptive, which if you're a madrich and you're looking to inspire, you're looking to help other guys reach their potential, you want to connect. That's really the basis of everything. Something that also happens in such interactions sometimes is that sometimes people are telling us a story, something that happened to them, and we had a similar experience. We had similar experiences growing up, something similar happened to us, and especially when it comes to advice giving, right? What we want to do is we want to share what happened to us and what we did and how we responded to the situation, overcame, so that they can do the same thing. And sometimes this can actually be very, very helpful. Sometimes when we preface this by connecting to what the person is saying without injecting our own story, just listening to what they're saying and the emotional content of what they're saying and helping them feel understood, it can sometimes be very, very helpful for us to share our story. What's important to remember, though, is that we're 2 different people, and things that maybe have worked for us won't necessarily work for somebody else. Situations that may on the surface sound very, very similar may in fact be very different because of certain subtle nuances in personality differences in situations. And so we want to keep in mind and maybe even communicate that my experience is not necessarily your experience. And I don't know if this could be helpful, but let me just share it with you. So something else to keep in mind. Another idea related to empathy over here and validation is the idea of genuineness. And this can be tricky sometimes. If we think about our interactions, just naturally, we're human beings. We like some people more and we like some people less. That's just how we are. Different people are going to connect in different ways. Everybody, though, has something likable about them. And when we want to communicate validation, when we want to communicate acceptance and empathy, it's important to find out, what about this person do I like? What about this person can I connect to? People can very often sense when someone really likes them and has their interests in mind versus when people are just doing ki'ilu. People will eventually spot a faker. And so even if we don't necessarily like this guy best of all, it's important to ask, what do I like about him? What positive qualities do I see in this person? Because if we take a moment and we think about it, we will find something. And then when we find something, it becomes easier to connect. On the topic of genuineness, it also gets complicated as a madrich because on the one hand, you are who you are, and you're also in the process of growth. And you're in a stage of life where there are some parts of you that you may want to transcend and aim for something higher. You may not be sure of it. There may be, you may be, in some ways up here on a higher level, in some ways on a lower level. You're in a process of flux as well. And so being genuine doesn't mean, being genuine is hard to really capture. What does it mean to really be who I am? Who am I? You may not know, in which case that itself is the being genuine. It's important to not necessarily pass yourself off as somebody you should be, especially if it's not something that you can maintain. Rather, this is who I am. This is the level I'm at. Here, these are the multiple levels that I'm at. And here is the level that maybe I'm genuinely striving to be. And these are the actions that I'm taking in my efforts to genuinely get to this goal. So you don't have to pretend to be somebody you're not. At the same time, you're also not necessarily one of the guys. You're in a different stage of your own development, and so you don't have to pretend to be one of them and change who you are, change the level that you're operating at in order to get them to like you and connect to you. Because if you do that, they're not actually going to connect to you. They're going to connect to whatever show you're putting on. In order to be genuine, in order to really be able to empathize and to connect, stay true to who you are and where you're holding. Don't raise yourself up or lower yourself down in terms of your spiritual level just in order to get other people to like you. That's going to happen either way. So this is all together the most effective way to experience empathy to other people, to experience empathy, to express empathy, to validate, and pass it back to Yochanan to talk about boundaries and limits.
That was very meaningful. So again, just going back now to the madrich's role as a whole, it's really important, as Sachi was saying, not to be someone who you aren't. And of course, you want to demonstrate to them that they can be themselves as well. A madrich is in an interesting position, right? He's a gesher, he's a bridge between the hanhala, between the administration, the rabbis, the teachers, and the guys. And it's important before embarking on your role to truly clarify your role, because every school might define a madrich slightly differently. Some schools might want you to actually, stay up late with the guys, talking to them, getting to know them better. Sometimes they want you to wake the guys up. Sometimes they want you to tell them what the guys are going through. So it's really important that you find out first and foremost from whatever institution you're working for, what do they want from you? So so you have your clarity on what your job is. And then when first meeting these guys, they come in September and they're trying to size you up. They want to know, what is this relationship about? You can actually present yourself for who you truly are. You're representing the school. You're working for the school, and you want to let them know that from the beginning, so there aren't blurred lines. You don't want to have them, trusting you as a confidant and seeing you as them, but then they're not sure later on, well, how do we know he's not telling the rabbis what we're telling him? And all of these things, right off the bat, you want to tell them, these are my boundaries. And that's the next thing we're going to talk about, recognizing and communicating limits. So you want to recognize your limits, first of all, in your role, what you are and what you aren't for them. And for that, you really do need to speak to the people who are paying you, to the people who are hiring you. What job do they want? And also, you want to be able to communicate to the guys limits in terms of your own personal space, what you need to function, what time you go to sleep, what time you're prepared to handle their questions, and when you're not. Like if it's during Seder, or if it's during mealtime, or if you're married and you have young kids at home, and you're putting, when it's appropriate for them to reach out, when it's not. And like Sachi said, it's a balance between giving of yourself, this side of being empathetic, and this other side of drawing the line in the sand. But this way, it gives everybody a sense of safety. There's a way I like understanding this is when they thought the world was flat. So people didn't go out and explore because they never knew where the end was. Maybe they'd fall off the end of the world. Only once the world was mapped and there was a way to discern where things were, where they were in their right place, then we were able to be adventurous. There's a rabbi of mine, Rav Michael Jacobs, gave a good example of this. He said, like horses that are running a race and the gun goes off and all their horses, jump out of their stalls, and the one jockey who didn't put on the blinders on the horse, that horse ran to the stands and, to the first fan who had popcorn. So the parameters and the boundaries allow us to run the race. Now we need our limits. We need our limits set in order that as Madrichim we don't burn out, as Mechanchim we don't burn out, because if you can give and give and give, that might work well up until Hanukkah time, and then you might find yourself not able to carry on in that same way anymore. So from the very beginning, in order to avoid any disappointment or any upset, you want to be able to clarify what it is you do for them and when it is you do for them. Another example that might come up, let's say a guy comes and he wants to borrow your phone. Now, some Madrichim, and everybody has to know their own personality, what they're comfortable with, they might feel very comfortable saying, sure, no problem. Let's say the guy asks again. Let's say he doesn't have a plan to, his hometown, a phone plan. And every time he wants to call, let's say the US or, Canada, South Africa, Australia, he's borrowing your phone, right? So if you're not comfortable with something, one of the best ways to say it is, I just don't feel comfortable with this. And to teach him how you're allowed to not feel comfortable. And that's okay. Like we were talking about allowing ourselves to have feelings. If you want to be able to empathize with these guys' feelings, you have to honor your own feelings. If there's something you're not comfortable with as a madrich, if someone is pushing your boundaries, and invariably there will be one or two guys who will do this. And maybe they're looking for attention, maybe they need some extra care, but if something you're not comfortable with, it's important to state it just very simply. I'm not comfortable with that. Why? It's not a big deal. If they start pressuring you, that's just how I feel. And it's okay. I like what you said, Sachi, about holding the tension. Being able to be okay with something that's a little uncomfortable. Sometimes there's all different personalities. Sometimes a madrich will be a madrich and he'll want the acceptance and adulation. He'll want the guys to like him. He'll want to be that madrich who everybody thinks is that awesome, amazing madrich. But when you set your limits, you might feel uncomfortable because, well, then if I'm saying no to a guy, or if I'm not being as generous maybe as my ultimate self is, so then he'll come to not like me, or he'll come to think that I'm a cheapskate, or he'll come to think that I don't care about him. But when you give that person the message of that you're allowed to be a human being with your own limits, long term, you're giving him a bigger gift. And it's important to recognize that in saying no, sometimes you're really giving more than just always saying yes. You're teaching them about boundaries. You're teaching them where the end of the world is, so then they can actually feel safe within the relationship when they can ask you, when they can't ask you, oh, it's after 11, I can't call my madrich right now. He said not after 11, unless, of course, it's an emergency. The same thing I want to say is true for the school. It's important to express to the yeshiva, to the school, whatever program you're helping out in, if you feel uncomfortable about something, if you feel uncomfortable about something about your job description, it's so important to speak to someone who you feel is directly responsible in handling, your job, and express it to them and explain to them. Reach out for help. Don't get stuck in a madrich bubble, okay? A madrich bubble is when you feel like you are the sole person who's responsible for what's going on in these guys' lives for the rest of the year. It's really not that way. View yourself rather as a bridge between the Anhala, the administration, and the guys, and you're the one who's supposed to travel freely. You're the one who's got that visa to both the school and the guys. And that way, if you can feel more comfortable in your job, and you can feel more comfortable with the guys, you'll be able to avoid burnout. So you want to be able to recognize your limits and communicate those limits. Another pitfall, and then after that I'm going to hand it back to Safi, another pitfall of when we can't say no, or we feel uncomfortable with that tension of setting limits, what we might do is we might enable a guy who has a problem, right? Some people have problems with boundaries, whether it's drinking, whether it's smoking, whether it's too much time on his phone, whether it's not going to sleep on time, whether it's not waking up on time. All of these things are outside the boundaries, right? The school has a certain curriculum. The school has a certain schedule. And when we recognize that someone is going over any of these boundaries, any one of those, and there's a plethora of many others, and they're consistently going over them, by being the nice guy, looking the other way, or just allowing it because you want them to feel good, that can enable them. That could allow them, unfortunately, to throw away their year. It can be, Tu B'Shvat, the first time a Rebbe comes over to a bacher and says, hey, you're really not, doing what you're supposed to be doing, and if you don't shape up, you're going to have to ship out. And you as the madrich, actually 3 months prior, could have been that guy who saw it in a more subtle way, saw with what time he's waking up, what time he's going to sleep, if he's really not happy or smiling, if he's not feeling good about himself. And instead of allowing him to get away with things or allowing him to break boundaries, you can really gently tell him, hey, I think we need to talk about some limits, or I think we need to talk about your schedule. And this will be such a huge gift for this guy or these guys, because what you'll do is you'll ask more from them. You'll ask them to step up, and they'll appreciate it later on. Again, you're going for the long haul instead of the short term, not confronting and not wanting to be that guy who's causing conflict or tension. Instead, what you're doing is you're respectfully setting a boundary, or you're respectfully talking about a boundary. And in this way, you'll be able to help him. Later on down the road, he'll come back to you and say, you know what, thank you so much. Because of you, I started going to Shacharis, or because of you, I started going to bed earlier, or because of you, I stopped drinking as much as I've been drinking on Shabbos. Something to that effect. And you have to have the courage to see what it will look like later on down the road when you sometimes lay down that limit. And it's so important to realize that when you're doing that, you're giving him something. So if you have any kind of negative connotation to setting limits or being a bit of a boundary person, you can now reassess, maybe change your paradigm to say, hey, this is really an act of giving. Because you're probably a madrich because you care and you want to give. That's probably why you're a madrich. And if you really want to give these guys, you want to give them healthy boundaries. Back to you, Safi.
Yeah, sure. So like Yochanan, like you were just saying, people become madrichim usually because they care, they want to connect, they want to give, and so that's an area that's really ripe for boundaries, and makes setting those boundaries really important, because there's one of you for a lot of guys, and that's going to create a lot of pressure on you. First of all, in terms of your desire to give and your desire to give too much. And that's something that's going to be there, because there's always going to be more that you can give, than you more of an opportunity to be able to give than that which you can give and the resources you actually have. And so some of the boundaries to be able to set are boundaries for yourselves to know, okay, I can't do everything. And there are some things that I have to let go. There are some guys who I can't necessarily deal with this issue. I can't necessarily focus on this guy. I can't, talk about things till all hours of the night. Most importantly, I can't solve every problem, right? Guys, there are going to be some guys who are going to come to you, please, solve my life issues for me. And you can't do it. You may not even be able to help them solve one issue. Going back to empathy, you can listen, you can connect, you can't necessarily fix people. That's sort of the boundary on you, the boundary of what you might be capable for. There might also be boundaries in terms of issues that you feel comfortable talking about. And those are boundaries that are also legitimate for you to set. There are times where something that might get in the way of setting boundaries is this feeling that, or maybe it's not a feeling, maybe it's, what's communicated to you, that one of the guys will be really, really angry at you, right? And really upset at you. And that's okay. It's okay. If someone is giving you feedback that you are absolutely the worst madrich in the world that ever existed, and you clearly have no idea what you're talking about or what it means to be madrich, right? It's probably not true, right? And the flip side of that is if somebody says that you are the best madrich that ever was, and only you can understand me and help me, it's probably also not true, right? You are an okay madrich, and you are madrich in the way that you can be, given who you are, in a way that nobody else can be. That being said, the act of setting boundaries can be tricky and sometimes very delicate, because we don't necessarily want people to feel bad. And even if we're going to be firm about something, it's not what we want. And so a couple of ideas to help with this setting boundary process is, before going into any interaction where you're about to set boundaries, think for yourself, what exactly is the problem here? In other words, in concrete terms, what do I want or what do I not want? And it's really important here to be very behavioral about it, right? What do I mean? If we have a tendency to sometimes to ask people for things that are not behaviors. For example, look, I would really appreciate if you stopped acting like a jerk. Okay, please just don't act like a jerk. Sometimes you can get really clingy sometimes. So what exactly does that mean? You're not describing a behavior, you're describing a kind of behavior. But what is the person doing? So an example of being really concrete and really behavioral about it is, sometimes we're having a conversation and I tell you, okay, we have to end now, I have to go to sleep, and you continue to sit there and not move, right? It's a concrete example of a specific behavior that person's doing. In the past week, you've asked me to borrow my phone twice a day, every single day, right? It's a concrete behavior. If I told a person, look, you're being too much of a schnorrer, could you please not be such a schnorrer? The person might not have any idea what you're talking about, right? But if you can give an accurate, concrete description of a behavior, it works much, much better, both in terms of you being able to ask yourself, okay, what exactly am I asking this guy for? And also for the guy you're talking to be able to communicate what it is that you want. So taking a minute beforehand and thinking about what exactly is the problem, what do I want, what do I not want, is really, really critical in terms of being able to deliver the message. The other is that you want to come non-confrontationally. And this is often, this often feels really, really difficult, because when we think about setting boundaries, often the way it feels to us in our mind is, we're about to, lay down the law and give some really, serious consequences. And he's not going to take it. He's going to feel like I'm punishing him and I'm being strict. And it's not actually like that. It's not actually experienced like that. Rather, what you're doing is you're bringing up an interpersonal issue, something that's happening, and you're approaching the other person in an attempt to solve a problem, something that's good for the two of you. And so it rarely is as severe of an issue or a feeling as you think it is. So you want to come in non-confrontational with an attitude of, look, let's work this out for both of us. I want to continue having a relationship with you. You want to continue having a relationship with me. We're gonna work this out. We're gonna figure it out. You want to smile. Don't underestimate the power of a smile. Use humor. You can joke around. You might be really serious about what you want, and you might be very clear about the result that you want. It doesn't mean that you can't have a sense of humor and you can't smile. You want to be really specific about what exactly is going on, what exactly is the problem, why it's a problem, what you want, and why it will be good for both of you, and what good will come out of the boundary, right? So, for example, you might want to use the example of a phone. You might want a guy to stop asking you for your phone so often. It's a matter, and so you're able to label that behavior. I want him to not ask for my phone so often. And then, well, what do I do want? So here's an important question to figure, because we know what's happening, and intuitively we know what we don't want. I don't want him to ask for my phone, but does that mean that I want him, I'd be okay with him asking for my phone once a day, once a week? Never. Please get your own phone. It's important to figure that out in advance. And so let's say I decide that, I'm okay with letting this guy have my phone once a week. Other than that, it's too much for me. This is the boundary that I decide on. So I can go over and I can say to him, with a big smile on my face, Shmerel, you're a great guy. You're amazing. But I'm going to be honest with you, like the whole borrowing my phone thing, it's a little too much for me. Okay. In the last week, you've come over to me and you've asked me to borrow my phone twice a day. And I'm not really so comfortable with it. I'd love to lend you my phone, but twice a day is too much. If you want to use my phone, if you have to use my phone, come to me once a week, no problem. I'll give it to you. But please, I would really appreciate it if you didn't ask me for my phone more often than that. Okay. When you're doing it, you want to appear confident. You want to, and what exactly does this mean? When you have confidence, so you make eye contact, you're standing straight up, you're being very straightforward with what you want to say. When you don't have confidence, automatically, maybe we'll avoid eye contact, we'll be a little bit hunched over, we won't say things directly. And sometimes those feelings are there. Those feelings of being really unsure, insecure, anxious, those feelings are going to be there. But if we can act the part, if we can act confidence, very often that goes a very long way in bringing up our level of confidence. Another important thing to keep in mind in dealing with boundary violations is validating opposing perspectives, right? And this is important because if you go into boundary setting with the perspective of there's only one right and wrong perspective here, you can get stuck. So for example, Let's say you'd like, again, back to the phone example, you'd like Shmerel to stop asking you for your phone, to only ask you for your phone once a week. Now, Shmerel might think that it's totally reasonable to ask somebody to borrow their phone twice a day, but you have a phone. I don't have a phone. It doesn't cost you anything more to give you, to let me borrow your phone. Why not? And so from my perspective, as Shmerel, I'm not doing anything unreasonable. You should lend me your phone, twice a day. If you're not lending me your phone twice a day, then what's wrong with you? You're being a jerk. And so if I take the perspective as the Madrich that there is a right and a wrong, and either he's right or I'm wrong, I can get stuck, or I can get sucked into a debate of whether it's okay for me to, for you to ask me for my phone twice a day. But if I can validate your perspective, and again, validating doesn't mean I agree. It means that it makes sense to me why you might, or I believe that it makes sense why you might think that asking for somebody their phone twice a day is okay. Maybe the culture that you grew up in is one in which people are constantly lending each other things, asking each other for favors. Maybe you grew up in a kibbutz where there was one phone for the whole kibbutz and everybody had to borrow the phone. Who knows? But it makes sense why you would have this perspective. So now I'm not arguing with you anymore, right? And now you're telling me that, I should lend you my phone every day. And I'm saying, okay, look, I hear you. You believe that it's reasonable for me to lend you my phone, and I get it. At the same time, I don't feel comfortable lending you my phone twice a day. It's past my limit. Here's what I would like. So I'm not getting dragged into a debate with you. I'm validating your right to your perspective, and I believe that it makes sense. But this is what I'm asking for, and I'm sticking to my goal. I'm sticking to my idea. I'm not getting derailed, not getting involved in discussions of, should I have the phone anyway? What's the problem with having? I'm setting a boundary. I'm making a request, and this is it. So these are some tips to help with setting boundaries, which can sometimes be a very, very sticky kind of situation. Back to you, Yochanan.
Thank you. So I just want to, we're about at the halfway mark here, and I just want to mention that if anybody wants to ask a question, you can drop it in the chat. You could either private message me or Tzachi, or you could just put the question out there for everyone. So feel free to ask any questions. We're going to talk now about something you may have heard of, but it's in our line of work, Tzachi, this is a major word, right? The word codependency. If you haven't heard it yet, you'll for sure hear it. Any relationship is at risk for codependency. What is codependency? So simply speaking, right, like it sounds, to be codependent with another person means how I feel or how I react is going to be dependent on what the other person feels, says, does, right? Their actions or their thoughts or even their feelings directly impact how I feel. So in a way, I lose my autonomy, I lose myself in the relationship. And that's really what a codependent does. He loses himself in a relationship. And I think the reason why it's important to talk about it in this forum is because, like we mentioned before, people who are in this business of being a madrich, being in a yeshiva, giving to other guys, often will have this component in their personality where they have compassion, they care about other people, and because they feel other people's pain, they feel other people's situation, they're empathic by nature. Because they care about other people, they can kind of lose their own sense of self or what they feel about something and get dragged into another person's experience and start to view themselves through the other person's eyes. So this is a really important thing. When you're helping people, it's so important to know what your position is in the relationship. For example, and let's go to some obvious example where it's, let's say, children, right? If you're a father or if you are an uncle, an older brother by a number of years, right? The relationship is very clear. Who needs who, right? The child needs the parent. The child needs the parent for shelter, for food, right? The child needs the parent for love to be taken care of, right? And because that child needs the parent, who's in charge of that relationship, the parent is going to dictate the terms of that relationship. The relationship is going to work according to, you ever hear your father say, my house, my rules. I for sure have heard that at least once, right? And it's so crucial to know that they need you and you don't need them. And a lot of times I'll tell this to parents, I'll tell this to Madrichim or teachers, and they'll take us, well, what do you mean? I need them to do certain things. I need my kids to go to bed on time. I need my kid to behave. I need this guy in the dorm to stop disturbing everybody else in the dormitory. I need him to stop playing his music out loud. So I want to take away the word need. Once you need something from your charge, your student, you're now reversing the roles. It's becoming role reversal. Again, let's go back to the parent and child. If a parent needs the child to go to bed on time, if the parent needs the child to eat dinner, what's happening is he's becoming, in a way, in a certain sense, the child, and the child is becoming the parent. Oh, you need something from me? Now I control you. Because if you need something from me, you're now vulnerable. You're now going to be subject to my whims, subject to my good or bad behavior. My compliance is going to make you feel either good or bad about our relationship. And what that does, obviously, that creates a terrible insecurity in the child. Because if there's a role reversal, and I really need my dad, but my dad needs me, so now I don't have a dad. I don't have someone who's really looking after me. Now, to take it to a much more subtle arena as the Madrich relationship, right? It's not as clear as parents and children, not as obvious, but it's nonetheless just as true, just as much true. They need you. They need you for hadracha. They need you to set the limits. They need you to listen to them, to understand them, to take some of their questions to the teachers, right? To sometimes be a person who could help them organize things practically in Israel, right? They might need you to, where's the laundromat? They might need you to teach them how to make a bed, right? They might need you to show them where's a great place to take out Shabbos food or set up a Shabbos at another family, right? They might need you for a number of things. You don't need anything from them. Everything you're giving them is for them. You know why I'm telling you not to play your music out loud? Because it's not good for you. It's not good for you to be a person who doesn't respect his peers. Because if you are a person who doesn't respect his peers, you're not going to get on in life well. You're not going to have viable relationships if you go to university and you have dorm life there, or when you get married and you have to live with people. Right? You have a spouse. It's not going to be good for you later on down the road. You know why you have to go to bed on time? Because you need to wake up on time. You always make it about them. And I think that's really important. That takes the codependency out of the relationship. You don't need these guys to comply. You don't need them to behave. You don't need them to like you. They need to have a productive year. And you're there to help them facilitate that. And if you could communicate that, you'll earn their respect. They will start to comply because they'll see that it's not about you. If it's about you, well, then it's up to them. Should they give you or not give you? Are they feeling magnanimous and generous that they're going to do something for their madrich or not? But if it's about them, so you put the burden and the responsibility, which is really, the word responsibility is the ability to respond. You're giving them the ability to respond to something in their behavior, to something in their year that they need to respond to in order to have a better year. And you keep putting that responsibility on them because they can handle it. It's their life and they're going to need to learn to develop responsibility. And this is such a crucial year for them. is such a crucial 2 years for them, 3 years for them, whichever program you're in, for them to really start to taste true responsibility, right? They're far away from home. They're in this program. They're living with other people. Sometimes for the first time in their lives, they're really living long-term. Besides maybe a summer camp, they're living long-term with other people. You know, I once heard something from Jordan Peterson, which was so great. He said, don't allow your children to become people that you will dislike later on in life. If you allow them to become people who you despise, they're really in big trouble because they need you. And if you don't like them, that's going to be big trouble for them later on in life, because if you can't like them and you're their parents, who's going to like this kid? So the same thing. You want to help these guys toe a line that will keep them respectable people in the society and the school that they're in. And in this way, you're helping them be able to go out further and then gain that respect from their peers going further, right? But you have to realize the relationship. And the relationship is that you're here to give them and you don't need anything from them. I think if you can really internalize this idea and remind yourself, I don't need anything from this guy. I don't need this guy to succeed. I don't need this guy to take responsibility. He needs it. So then I think you can, that's a good way to catch yourself from slipping into codependency. If you appreciate who's giving who's in the role of madrich and who's in the role of receiving from that madrich. And therefore, by doing that, you take yourself out of any risk of falling into codependency, which now he can let you down. We have a question here. This is great. Thank you for asking the question. I was paused to read it. From Uri. But how about when you're not feeling ready to live up to the responsibility at this point you put on them whilst it is necessary for the school to have compliance? Excellent question. This is a very important question. I'm going to get back to it in a moment, or maybe Safi will get back to it. I'll finish my points of codependency and then I'll hand the question over to Safi. So, great question. So again, if I need this person to do well, then I'm going to be disappointed, right, if he's not doing well. If I need this guy and I put my relationship on the line and say like, hey, do it for me, go to bed for me. Remember I let you borrow my phone 3 times last week? Or remember when, the washing machine broke in Yeshiva and I let you do your laundry in my own home, and now you're not gonna like, put out the cigarette in the hallway when there's no smoking in the Yeshiva, When it becomes personal, it becomes easily codependent. Now you're going to feel resentful. You're going to feel hurt. When we give and give and give, we can easily get burnt out or feel resentful when, let's face it, this age group isn't necessarily always going to be so considerate of other people's feelings. They're coming out of selfishness, right? Until this point, their whole life was receiving and receiving, and maybe they even came from a home where everything was given to them. Maybe they're even a little bit spoiled. Maybe some of them are spoiled brats. In order to protect yourself from feeling hurt or disappointed, realize that everything they're doing and everything you're giving them is for them. It's not for you. You have your job, and it says in Perkei Avos, right? Lo alecha ligmor. It's on you to do your bit, but the success is not yours. To complete the job is on them, right? So in this way, you take a step out of that give and take. It's not give and take. Don't even enter into give and take. It's a slippery slope, and it really ends up in codependency. And like I said, if you haven't heard it yet, you'll be sure to hear that term as you go on and further in your relationships. For those to see some people maybe older here, for sure they know what I'm talking about. And for the younger Madrichim, this is so important. Just remember this, that they need you. You don't need them. I'm going to hand this question off to Safi. This is a perfect question for this forum.
Sure. It's such a great question. Also because I think it demonstrates, Yochanan, the point that you're making, where we very easily take on, for ourselves, the responsibility for our charges. I need you to do this. And so over here, the question is, how about when they're not feeling ready to live up to the responsibility at this point you put on them, while it's necessary for the school to have compliance? Now, notice the phrasing. I think this is great phrasing. The responsibility at this point you put on them, right? We have the feeling in our interactions with these guys that we're asking this from them. We're making this demand on them that they're not ready yet to fulfill. And that's I think an accurate depiction of how it often feels to us when we're asking people to do something. But what's important for us to remember is that we're not actually putting the responsibility on them. The responsibility exists, right? There's a certain standard that the school that they chose to go to requires them, certain behaviors that they have to do. It's not us as Madrichim putting it on them. It's the demand of the environment. And what we're here to do is to help them figure out how they can do that. So, a guy needs to, he needs to show up for Seder, and he needs to be there for the full Seder, 3 hours. It's a long time. I'm not used to it. In high school, we had, it was maximum 2 hours that we had to, sit through. 3 hours, I can't do 3 hours. I'm not ready for 3 hours, right? And so I'm not here to tell you, no, you must do 3 hours. I'm also not here to tell you, don't worry about it. 2 hours will be fine. What I am here to do is to hear you out, connect to what you're saying, validate, like, you're right. Coming from a situation where you've never had to do this, this is a huge, huge challenge, and I can hear how it's totally scary for you. Maybe we can have a conversation about what you can try, how you can get to this point. What are the things that you can do in your life to help you grow? Because ultimately, when Yeshiva wants you to sit for 3 hours, it's about your process of growth. You are here in order to grow. And here's the challenge that you are facing in your growth. We can have a conversation about what you can try. But ultimately, you're sitting through Seder is not my responsibility, nor is it a responsibility that I'm putting on you. It's a responsibility that you have that's there. And we can talk about how you're going to do it or what attempts you can make. So I think it's a great question. It's a great question in itself. It's a great question in terms of illustrating this point of how we tend to think about these things. And part of answering that question is stepping out of that paradigm of, I need you to do this. I am putting this responsibility on you. We're a team, and I can help you problem solve. Another one, students not fulfilling current COVID restrictions, leaving the premises. So this is a big one, and I think this is one that we've never really faced before. This is the first year that we're doing something like this. Hopefully the last year ever that we'll be doing something like this.
Right.
But great question, and I think that for over here, this is again something that's not necessarily a madrich issue, because the madrichim are not making these rules. These are the rules that the yeshiva is requiring. And I think going back to Yochanan, your point before, when you were talking about how it's important for madrichim to know their roles. Each program, each yeshiva talking to, defining what exactly is my responsibility here toward the school. What is my role? What are the rules of what I have to do? And I'm acting within those rules. So what happens from a program's point of view when there's a guy breaking quarantine and he's not supposed to do that? When there's a guy breaking these rules, something which could potentially jeopardize the entire yeshiva, what is the yeshiva's attitude towards this? What is my role as a madrich in dealing with this? So this ties into the idea of setting boundaries. It ties into the idea of communicating your role as a madrich of, here's what the rules are. Here's how it has to be. Here are the boundaries that I'm going to set. And I'm going to clearly communicate with you guys what to expect.
Right. And the thing that we're coming to next is responding to disclosure and
Hmm.
all these other things. A lot of times where I think just to be straight up with a student, let's say a student isn't complying, I think it's good for them to know that you can share with them, I have a responsibility, to tell the Anhala, to tell the dean, to tell the principal who is not keeping the rules. And it's not personal. You can tell them, you can look the guy in the eye and say, listen, this is not personal. And, I have to share this. We have responsibility. The Ministry of Health is demanding this from us. We can shut down the entire school. And again, it goes back to Jordan Peterson's idea of, not letting my kids become something that I'm going to hate. In other words, this can potentially ruin it for the entire yeshiva, maybe for many yeshivas, who knows? And I think the idea of putting it back on them. If you take responsibility for these guys keeping the COVID restrictions, you are going to get so stressed out so fast that before Rosh Hashanah, you're going to be burnt out already, and your wife's going to have to be like, you need a day off, because this is high stress. This is really difficult. There are going to be so many infractions. There are going to be so many ways that these guys are going to push these boundaries. There's going to be the kids who say, I don't believe in it. It's a stupid rule. It doesn't make sense. And you know what? They're not alone. There's tens of thousands of people demonstrating in the streets about how some of these rules don't make sense and they don't want to wear masks. And you could identify with them and validate. It's just not your rule, but it is your responsibility. This is your responsibility. And then you share that and you say, and your responsibility, when you came into the yeshiva and you agreed to keep the rules of the yeshiva, it's on you. And I like it. I do it with my kids all the time. It's not good for you to have that extra piece of candy. It's not me not letting you have candy. It's not me, turning off, Fireman Sam. That's it. You had one episode. It's for you, because you have to be an upstanding citizen. It's because you have to comply with the yeshiva, because that's what you agreed to do, and you're keeping your word. I think it's good if you present to them some kind of, higher morality. Like, you're a guy, I'm sure, who wants to keep his word. I'm sure you're a guy who wants to be a good team player. And this, and just, I would say, again, personally, I would say, keep on putting it back on to them. I care about you, and I'm doing this for you. And never, the word me doesn't come in. As soon as me gets in there, you're going to start feeling responsible. And if you start feeling responsible, you're going to be overloaded very quick by these guys who are very quick to exploit any kind of weakness in your stance. They smell a bit of like, oh, okay, one time you went out without a mask. If you give them that, they'll take a lot more. So you want to say, this is what you need to do for you. And then you walk away. I'll give you a quick story of codependency. And I think this is really a nice story. It's a personal story. I had a son who didn't like going to shul, and I would go Friday night, and I'd go, okay, I'm going to shul. At that time, he was maybe 12, and I was starting to get nervous. He's going to be bar mitzvah soon. And I would say, come on, let's go. And my wife was like, what are you doing? I'm like, what? He needs to go to shul. And she quickly sensed my codependency that I needed him to go to shul. She's like, is it for him or is it for you? I'm like, it's for him, which was a blatant lie. And she's like, and she called me into the bedroom. We had a little team huddle. And she's like, this is what you got to do. I'm going to shul. And then you walk out and you go to shul. And I'm like, but he's not going to come. She's like, that's right. He might not come. And the kachava, that's what happened. The first week, I said, I'm going to shul. And I walked out the door and he didn't come. And I had to deal with my own codependent feelings of feeling disappointed, like he was doing something. The next week, I said, okay, I'm going to shul in 5 minutes, give a little warning, of course. Going to shul in 5 minutes, got to the door. And of course, he's still not wearing his shoes. And I'm like, okay, I'm going now. He's like, oh, wait, Abba, just let me put on my shoes. I was like, you know what? I'll wait a minute for you to put on your shoes. By the third week, he was waiting at the door with me when I had to go to shul. because I stopped needing him to go to shul with me. It became something, I'm doing it. I'm keeping the rules. I'm taking care of me, and your responsibility to take care of you. I've never had, this kid now goes to shul all the time. Thank God now he's 16, but now there's no, and thank God he was my bechar, so I had to learn these things. Now, no, the rest of the kids like ducks, once you take the codependency out of it, they will start to follow your lead because you had kavod for yourself for what you believed was the right thing to do. You did it, and you left it up to them what they're going to do. If they don't do it, at the end of the day, they don't have to face you. They have to face the Rosh Yeshiva, the dean. And you could just say, not my problem. I care about you. That's why I'm telling you. And it's good for you. That's why I'm telling you. But that's where you leave it. Safi, take it away.
Okay. So one thing that happens often in the year abroad. So you have guys who, for the last 18 years of their life, they were, they had a certain lifestyle. They lived in a certain place. They lived with certain people. They did certain things. All of a sudden, now everything's changed. Everything's different. Different people, different environment, different set of freedoms and privileges that they never had. And with being on their own, with being away from their family, away from their setting that they've been in for so long, things come up. Old secrets, new realizations, things happen. And these can be sometimes very, very significant realizations for them. Very significant things about them that they feel like they need to start looking at. And so what will happen often is that the madrich will be the target is the wrong word, will be the person who they will come to with certain kinds of disclosures. And what disclosures can be are stories, significant stories about something that happened in their past, maybe something traumatic that happened to them, something serious that they're going through, something that they're trying to figure out about themselves, certain issues in their sense of identity or sexual orientation, or certain really concerning behaviors that they have or relationships that they have that are going on, and they don't know what to do with it necessarily. They need to figure it out, but they need somebody to share it with. And very often the madrich, as somebody who's not the hanhala, but also not somebody who's just another student, somebody who's in that go-between space, sometimes can become the perfect person to be the receiver of this disclosure. There's a significance to this. There's a significance both in terms of sometimes what you're hearing from these guys, and a significance in their telling you, because sometimes this is the first time that this is coming out. And if you think about what this means, this might be somebody telling you that that they actually have a pretty serious drinking problem, or a drug problem, or there's a certain behavior that they're doing that's actually pretty troubling to them. They have OCD that's really bad. They were abused in their past, maybe by somebody very close to them. They're attracted to people of the same gender. Things that can be really serious realizations that they're coming to you about. And the question is, what do you do with that? How do you respond? How do you react? What do you do with the information once you have it? And a couple of things. First of all, being aware that this might happen, and it's a normal thing to happen for these guys at this age. It's something to keep in mind, because when you hear it, you don't want to react with shock. You don't necessarily want to be thrown. What you want to communicate by your reaction is, it's safe to tell this to me. It's okay. I'm capable of hearing what you want to tell me. And that being said, what you want to communicate to them, directly or indirectly, is thank you. I recognize that it's not muvan me'elav that you're going to come to me with this. There has to be some degree of trust of me and some degree of feeling close enough to want to share this with me. So in a sense, it's a privilege for me to hear this from you. And I'm not going to make you talk to me about it more than what you want to. I'm also not going to make you stop. So it's safe. I will accept what you want to tell me. It's safe to tell me. I can handle it. Tell me just as much as you feel comfortable telling me. Don't tell me more. I'm not going to try to make you tell me more. I'm not going to try to tell you to, to get it all out and tell me every little detail, especially if this is something related to a trauma. I'm just going to listen. I'm going to listen. I'm going to communicate empathy, what we spoke about in the beginning, looking at the emotion that's in what they're saying. In line with this thinking of me being a safe person to receive this information, it's important to realize also that we can't necessarily fix it. We don't necessarily know what to do with this information, and that's okay. That's part of this whole process, because if the guy knew what to do with the information, he wouldn't necessarily be telling you. He would be going and doing what he needs to do, but he doesn't know. And you don't know either. And your role in that situation is just to be the understander, the receiver and the understander, not the fixer necessarily. So you want to be able to stay calm, notice that tension in yourself, the reaction, maybe the judgment of what they're saying, the desire to do something about it, and you can calm yourself and you can just allow yourself to listen. The approach, rather than being one of here's what you should do or here's what I think about it, is one of curiosity. I'm wondering about your experience. I'm wondering what it's like for you to be going through this. I'm wondering what it's like for you to be telling me about this. I'm curious rather than directive. Especially in the case of trauma, you don't necessarily want to get into the actual details because the details don't really matter so much. What matters at this moment is that this person is communicating to you. They're telling you a story. And that's really the focus over here. People are often, especially when we're talking about a trauma, it's very, very common for people to be scared of not being believed, right? You're not going to believe my story. And not just that, but you're also, even if you do believe my story, you're going to judge me because somehow what happened to me is my fault. It's a very, very common belief that people who've been through a trauma will hold on to. And it says something negative about me, the fact that I've been through this. And so reassuring that through your actions, through your words, that you're not judging the person, that you're curious about their experience, that you're open to hearing about it, and that you do believe them, can go a very, very long way and is really important. The ability to just identify their emotion, to validate their perspective, and to validate what they might be feeling in the moment is very, very powerful. And as far as confidentiality, where people are sharing something about themselves, and we're talking about where they're not necessarily telling you something dangerous about themselves, something that puts them into danger, or something that puts other people in imminent danger, it's okay to tell people, I don't have to tell anybody about this. And if you're choosing to tell me, this is something that's between us and we can talk about it. I can support you. I can't necessarily tell you what to do about it. I can't necessarily advise you, but I can listen and I can hold this with you. And maybe together we can talk about what to do with it. And with that, Yochanan, I'll hand it back to you to talk about relaying information.
Right. Because, and that's something that really at that point where they're about to disclose, they might be concerned, and they'll often ask you, are you going to tell anybody about this? Is my secret safe with you? And that's tricky. And you want to, again, just like everything else we've been talking about tonight, you want to hit it straight on and just say, there are things that you might have to share with the higher ups. There might be something you would have to share with the Yeshiva. And if there is something that you really feel that cannot be shared with anybody else, maybe don't share it with me either. And I think it's hard to tell that to someone when someone wants to disclose something to you, because you don't want to scare them away. You might be the first person they're about to share something with and they feel comfortable with you. But again, it's my line to people is, I tell them, if it's something that may hurt you or another, then that's something I'm going to have to disclose. And because I'm framing it in that way, in a caring way, that I'm trying to protect them from being hurt or someone else being hurt, that often, allies their fears a little bit. But there might be a time where you will lose a fish off that hook because you're being honest. And if it's something that you feel you can't hold, it's above your pay grade, it's something that is out of your league, it's something that you consider that, or the Hanhala, this happened to me once. If the Hanhala says there are certain things you have to tell us, it's important in the beginning of the year for you to really get the guy's trust to be straight up and honest about some things you have to tell the school. And if they don't want the school to know, then they shouldn't tell you. And that might sound like unfortunate because you're closing off certain possibilities, but it's honest, and in the long run, they'll have more trust for you. You were saying that as well. So the idea of passing on information is, if it's relatively innocuous. In other words, if it's something that, the yeshiva doesn't need to know about, something that a guy was just telling you about, his girlfriend or something, and that that's something that the school understands and appreciates that guys in this school are going to be struggling with. Or if a person, drank last week too much and he got sick, and that's something that unfortunately happens in the yeshivas, and the yeshiva knows about it, and the yeshiva isn't demanding that you report to them. So then, of course, that's a great opportunity to build, and solidify trust between you and your student. But if it's something, and Amudim deals with this all the time, Machon Dvir, I know, also deals with this all the time, that a real trauma, a person who, God forbid, was sexually abused, it's important after you validate, and your first reaction, you might be there, the first reaction is, like Zahi said, you believe them, and it's not their fault. You really give that message over, like we just heard. After that, I would say your role is to encourage them, really encourage them to speak to someone, right? Speak to someone like the teacher, speak to the principal, speak to the mashkiach, or speak to the therapist. And really, this is something that goes back to the beginning of our talk, right, Zahi, about, really clarifying your role with the institution you work for. That can you, as a madrich, simply recommend someone to see a therapist? Or does that need to go through the yeshiva? Do they need to know who would like to see a psychiatrist? Maybe a guy says, listen, I'm running low on my medication. I didn't write it down in my application forms. I didn't tell anybody. I suffer from anxiety. I suffer from depression. Is that something the yeshiva needs to know? Is that something you could give him a number to a psychiatrist that, beforehand you discuss it with the school? Who are our psychologists? Who are our psychiatrists? Machon Dvir, Amudim. Can we tell people to call Amudim, or do we have to tell people, do we have to tell the yeshiva before we refer anybody to Amudim? That's an important question you want to really find out. But most importantly, I think the most important part of this picture is to be totally honest with the the bacher, the student, whoever it is who's disclosing to you that you feel you feel it's not right for you to hold this. This is quite a big story. This is an important thing, and it's for their betterment. And try to work with them. Which teacher in the yeshiva do you think is a guy who you can trust, or you feel safe telling this to? Or sometimes there's more than one principal of yeshiva. Sometimes there's two people who run the yeshiva. Which one can we go speak to? Or I can speak to them on your behalf and get them to give you a phone call or something like that. You can be a buffer. But passing on information is something that you always want absolute transparency with. You don't want it to be that a guy told you, common example, at least in the schools that I went to, a guy is smoking pot, absolutely forbidden, against the rules. He tells you he's smoking pot, not that you caught him, that's different. He tells you he's smoking pot. To be able to tell him, to listen, I want you to know this is something I really feel it's important. You tell Rabbi so-and-so. He has experience with this. The yeshiva knows that there are guys who do this. They weren't born yesterday. They know, and they'll deal with it appropriately. They'll help you and encourage them to pass it on. In that way, you could tell them the Gemara that moide b'kinas patar. When someone is modeh to something, often it's looked down as it's looked at as favorable. Again, if it's abuse related, if it's some real trauma or someone who has a real intense issue, it could be someone has same-sex attraction, and it just started in the yeshiva. And my experience has been often it happens. It can just start in the yeshiva because that's when they're living with other men. They're not with girls. And it can just kind of happen upon them. It's totally embarrassing for this guy. He's only telling you, and you have to swear you won't tell anybody before you receive that information. Now, I'm not saying that is something that is important to pass on, but I'm saying before you receive that information, you have to be clear to them that, hey, whatever you're about to tell me, you should just know that we might need to talk about it with a third party. We might need it. There are organizations in Israel. There are places that deal with this. There are therapists that speak English that we could help you with, or we could even help get you the right kind of support, right? The right kind of support. There's someone else in the yeshiva who struggled on a certain path. There's another person that that you could hook them up with that could be a source of support. But it's important that they know before they throw something on you, say, listen, just in case you might not feel comfortable with this, but I work for the yeshiva and there's certain things they want me to tell them. If you don't feel comfortable telling me still, I understand, I appreciate it. That guy, if he should walk away from you, that's the guy you want to check up on though. A few days later, there's a good chance, because you were honest with him, that he will disclose, he will talk to you, even if it's a month later. Okay, we're gonna send it back to Tzachi, and I guess we're running out of time, so we'll have closing statements. I hope that was helpful. Yeah.
All right. If anybody has any questions before we end, happy to take questions. If not, so this was thank you everybody for participating. The next session is going to be more about the acute issues that come up in terms of psychological disorders, identifying red flags, personality disorders, understanding some of the more acute mental health issues that guys can come in with. This session was more about overall communication and boundary setting and empathy, which are the tools within which you're going to use everything else. So just to know what to expect for next time. Okay. Yochanan, thank you very much. It was good teamwork. Take care.